So we're looking at idols and idolatry in our life today. We're reading somebody else's mail, and they were kind of immersed in the culture of idolatry, overt shrines and altars throughout the city and in people's homes. So this concept of idolatry, they grew up with it. It was part of their everyday culture. It was not unusual for these newer Christians to have grown up in a home where they had their own shrines to their own gods and goddesses, and they would worship regularly, very intently, so that their gods and their goddesses wouldn't be angry with them. And the same thing happens in homes today of idol worshiping countries. But here, in making an application to your own life, when we see all the material things, all the things of this physical creation, we put them into a category called temporary. But some people don't have that knowledge. They don't understand that all the physical things that we can weigh and measure, that we can touch and use, all these physical things are temporary. The earth and everything that's in it, all the elements, are going to go away. They're going to melt with an intense heat, and they're useful, but they're not what we should be living for. And Paul says to the church in Corinth, however, not all men have this knowledge, that there is only one God. But some, being accustomed to the idol until now, eat food as if it were sacrificed to an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. But food will not commend us to God. We're neither the worse if we do not eat, nor the better if we do eat. What goes in to your body is not going to defile you. Jesus made that very clear. He said, the food that you eat doesn't make you right or wrong in the eyes of God. And thus he declared all foods clean. And Paul is repeating that concept in a little different context when he says, what you eat or what you don't eat doesn't make your relationship with God defiled or purified. That's not what does it. Now, don't take it out of context, and don't take this as the only teaching on food. It's clear that what goes into us doesn't commend us to God, doesn't gain God's approval. We don't gain anything if we don't eat it, except maybe a better weight. But spiritually, we don't gain anything by avoiding certain kinds of foods. We don't lose anything if we eat it. If there was a steak that was offered in an idol temple, it doesn't change the value of the steak or the hamburger. It doesn't change the value of the food itself, because we know that the idol has no impact whatsoever on the value of the meat, and eating that hamburger is not an act of worship. I'm not worshiping that idol by eating this steak or this cheeseburger. That's not an act of worship on my part. It doesn't impact my relationship with God. I receive that food with gratitude from my great provider. But some of the new Christians in Corinth, they knew that beef or that goat or whatever it was had been offered in the idol temple. And they grew up with that kind of home worship. And so if they know that it's offered to an idol and they eat it because of their long history of worshiping the idol just like that, if they eat it, it really they feel like it's wrong, because they feel like, okay, I'm worshiping that god or that goddess by eating this meal. And so that's what Paul's saying. Those of us that are completely convinced that the idol is nothing to be worshipped whatsoever are fine. You can eat whatever you want, or you can avoid eating whatever you want. But those of us that have a problem with those kinds of foods, whether they're vegetables or meat, that had been part of a worship ceremony in a pagan idol temple, I can't do that because that's what we used to do all the time. And I can't do that. And that's okay also. So if you don't eat the meat, that's fine. If you do eat the meat, that's fine. The rule of thumb is, what am I going to do that will be pleasing to Jesus? How can I live? How can I eat? How can I spend? How can I speak in a way that pleases Jesus? Because I love him. And we love him because he first loved us. And I want to remind you this morning that God loves you. You cannot change that. He will always love you. And we love you too. God bless you.